Good evening, everybody, and thank you all for coming here to help me with my school project and listen to the speeches I'm going to give tonight. I'll be giving an informative speech about funerals and death, and I'll also be doing a persuasive speech about an environmental issue. So sit back and enjoy the show. Could you please get the lights? Could you begin? Funerals are for the living, to rejoice in the one who has caused this coming together. That quote is by Leonard Bernstein, and it answers one of the many questions that people have asked me over the years as a funeral director's wife. Tonight, I plan on sharing with you the purpose and value of funerals, the types and trends of funerals, and also some interesting historical facts and originations about funerals. We'll start with the purpose and value of funerals. The main reason of a funeral is to provide social support for the family and friends of the person who died. It brings people together to share the loss and the love and to express the feelings of the person who died. A funeral is also to celebrate life and to say goodbye to the deceased. It gives us a time to share that and to make it real and to celebrate the life instead of making it so morose and saying he's gone forever. The funeral is also for visual confirmation of death. If you're going through the first stage of grief, which is denial, and you don't believe it, and how could it be, this is a visual confirmation that yes, my loved one has died. It's also part of the healing process to have a service and to share and to get your feelings out with others. Part of the healing process is the 5 stages of grief. And these are experienced by everyone in different ways, in different orders. There's no right way to experience these stages. But the normal first stage is denial, as I said. You cannot believe this happened, you're in shock, you're numb, and you're just really trying to absorb the loss of your loved one. The next stage is anger. You could be angry at the person who died. You could be angry at yourself, your family. You could be angry at God, why he would possibly let something like this happen. The next stage is bargaining or guilt. You're trying to justify what happened. You're trying to find a way to make it not happen. You can say, maybe if we had gone to the doctor and caught this illness sooner, or maybe if someone else had driven that night, everything would be okay. The next stage is depression, which is a very real and very common stage that everyone goes through. And it's a necessary stage as well. You all of a sudden have this emptiness and loneliness that you're feeling, and it's depressing, and it's normal to feel that way, and you should let yourself feel that way. The last stage is acceptance. This is where you decide to accept what's happened, know that it's never going to be the same, know that it's never going to be 100% all right, but you accept the fact that your loved one has died, and it's time to move on. It's time to live your life again for yourself and for other loved ones in your family and your friends. Okay, now we'll talk about the types of funerals. The first type we'll talk about is a traditional, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. This is where the family would have a viewing or visitation, which usually takes place the night before or the day of a funeral. This gives everyone a time to come through and pay their respects. And then the service would be held again the next day or the day of, where it would be a sermon and a eulogy, and then after that would be a burial at the cemetery. That would be a traditional service. The next one would be a home service, which does not happen a lot these days. This is where, usually with hospice care, if you want to have the immediate family come, maybe a few friends come and visit the family and see the deceased one last time before you have them buried. The next one is a cremation, which could be done either right away after the death with no service, but then you could have a memorial at a later date, or you could have a full service and then cremate the body afterwards. And the last type is a green funeral, which has gained popularity in the last few years with the environmental issues. And with a green funeral, you use non-toxic chemicals if you're going to embalm a body, or don't embalm the body at all. There's no formaldehyde. You use a biodegradable cardboard casket instead of a wooden casket. Everything goes back to the earth. The person is buried in, there's no headstone, but you mark the person's grave with a tree or a natural stone. Pre-planning is very popular with families these days because it relieves the family of difficult decision. It's paid in advance, so it takes the burden away from the family, and it also ensures that your personal preferences that you wish for your own funeral service are met. One of the bigger trends that's growing in popularity is cremation. Back in 1961, only 4% of funerals went the way of cremation. By 2009, that number had jumped to 38%. And a projected number for 2015 would be 47%, while in 2025 it'll be 51%. Some phrases that you may have heard but not known where they came from, for example, would be saved by the bell and dead ringer. As people would dig up coffins in England in the 19th century, they would notice scratch marks underneath the lid of the coffin. So they realized that people were getting buried alive. So they started making coffins with bells attached with a string that ran into the casket so that if you woke up a couple days after you were buried, you could ring the bell and someone could come and dig you up. Which leads us to graveyard shift. That would be the people working at the cemetery who would have to listen for the bells during that time so they could get you brought back to life. Mourning clothes are not as popular these days, but back in the 19th century, women had to wear black garments to mourn their husbands for at least a year. And a funeral banquet is very popular these days still, where there's a meal prepared after the service for the family to get together and friends to honor the deceased. The fears of death come from the Puritan age where dead was believed to have power to harm the living. And death was also brought on by original sin. And death means loneliness even today. To cope with death, it's a good idea to offer meals to the family and allow time for them to grieve and to cry. But then don't forget them. Remember to invite them to your family get-togethers, to social events. Keep them in your life to let them know that you're still here for them. And help them with their children anywhere that they would need help with their kids. In talking with children and coping, Thomas Bigtoe in his book, Talking to Children About Death, mentions that you should be very honest and straightforward when discussing death with children. And don't give them stories and fairy tales. He quotes, "The truth will never scare a child as much as his or her own imagination will." And he stresses how important it is to be honest with the kids so they're not expecting the person to wake up. I'd like to leave you tonight with a quote by Michelangelo that says, "If we have been pleased with life, we should not be displeased with death, since it comes from the hand of the same master." So thank you, and have a great evening tonight.